So I'd like to give it up for Mr. Martin Hutchison.
Thank you. You know, I have this idea. And the idea is that if you want to revitalize a community, you have to change the composition of that community's vacant lots. Now let that sink in a minute. If you want to revitalize a community, you have to change the composition of that community's vacant lots. Now, in the community where I live, we have lots, many vacant lots. They're everywhere. They're in the heart of neighborhoods. There were houses once were and burned down, and nobody built them back because they were too small or whatever. These vacant lots are the blight of neighborhoods oftentimes. They're depositories for dog poop that no one picks up. They're a collection place for trash that people in cars throw out the window, and the wind blows into these vacant lots and they get hung up. Or people walking down the street just get done with their soda and they throw the bottle down, and then the wind blows it and it collects in these vacant lots. Vacant lots in neighborhoods bring down the self-esteem of neighborhoods. In the community where I live, we have lots of children. Children that are often left to raise themselves because they're in one family, working family situations where a parent's doing all they could to keep their heads above water and to provide for their children. And these children are bored. And bored children create problems in communities. They vandalize. They fight. They lay on the couch and watch TV and drink soda and junk food all day. Well, in my community, we also have a number of vacant lots that are adjacent to playgrounds. There's one. There's another. Playgrounds are this place where children who are bored come to interact with one another and to get rid of some of their boredom. But the problem is that most of our playgrounds have the same apparatus there day in and day out. It doesn't change much. And so sooner or later, especially in our culture, where we're used to seeing everything quickly before our eyes, these playgrounds become boring. And so you have a recipe with bored children, often left unattended by parents, teaching the older children or teaching the younger children the ways of the street. These bored children are fighting among one another. They're vandalizing. They're scheming of ways they can occupy their time. So I had this idea. What if we changed the composition of the vacant lots in our community? And so I was driving around the neighborhood where the church that I pastor is located, not too far from here. And I noticed that there is a vacant lot, this particular vacant lot, that's adjacent to a playground. And then I discovered that it was owned by the city. And so I had this idea. What if we turned that vacant lot into a community garden? And so the church that I pastor is next door to another church. And for the last 8 years, that church and 2 other churches that meet inside that church have worked together to do a homeless men's shelter in our community. And so I approached the pastors and said, why don't we form a collective of churches and do something to share the love of Jesus with our community and to be a blessing? So let's create a community garden on that vacant lot. And so that's what we did. We formed a collective of churches. We call it the Corner Church Collective, and we created a community garden on this vacant lot. You see, if you're going to change, if you want to revitalize a neighborhood, a community, a city, you have to change the composition of that community's vacant lots. So we created this community garden, this vibrant, beautiful, lush place where people, neighbors, could come and pick vegetables for free. And we thought that all we were doing was growing vegetables to give them away. But we quickly found out that we were growing more, far more than veggies. Neighbors from all walks of life came together and met in the community garden, a place that they avoided prior to this unless they had dogs. Neighbors from the big houses down the street where one family lives in each house walked down the street now to the community garden, which was once a vacant lot, and met their neighbors that lived in the big houses adjacent to the lot where 5, 6, 7 families live in each of those big houses. In this community garden, they meet, they mingle, they work side by side, they get to know one another, they recognize that they're not bad people. And all of a sudden, we're growing more than veggies. And it's a beautiful picture when the diversity of our neighborhood comes together in a community garden on this once vacant lot, this blight of the neighborhood. We're growing more than veggies. Those bored children on the playground, it didn't take long for them to want to come and get involved. In fact, the bored children became engaged children as we built the beds, 16 beds, 24 feet long by 4 feet wide. Those bored children also showed up the days that we had to shovel dirt, 4 dump truck loads of dirt into those raised beds. And some of those bored children, now engaged children, worked harder than the adults. They also showed up when we planted seeds and plants that soon would become vegetables, and they were engaged in that process. Bored children becoming engaged children. We're growing more than veggies, folks. These children also love to water. In fact, every time you would come to water before we got our irrigation system set up, the children would take the wand and they would want to water. Well, this mother, normally when children are asked to do something, they just lay around and look at you like you got 3 heads and they don't want to do a thing, you know? But this child was busily watering, and his mom liked so much what he was doing that she wanted to get involved, and so she took the watering wand away from him, and look at his reaction. It's not a typical child reaction. It's like, you're taking my work away from me. And so all of a sudden, instead of bored children, you have engaged children, and you're growing more than veggies. Weeding. I grew up on a farm. Weeding was not something that I liked to do, and we had to do a lot of it. But look at this little boy. Look at the expression on his face as he plucks that weed that he had just pulled from the garden. These bored children become engaged children as they learn how to harvest vegetables that are healthy and delicious. And they love spending time in the garden, walking around, finding those vegetables to take home to their family. Without fail, when children who are bored become engaged and work with passion and purpose alongside of positive and affirming adults, I believe you can change the trajectory of their lives forever. We're growing more than veggies, folks. And if you want to revitalize a neighborhood, you have to change the composition of that neighborhood's vacant lots. If children grow carrots, children will eat carrots. And they learn that carrots come out of the ground and need to be washed off before you put them in your mouth, and that they don't come from the produce section or the frozen food section of the local market down the street. When children grow kale and collard greens, 2 things that I would never eat as a child. Look at the smile on her face. When children grow kale and collard greens, they eat kale and collard greens, and they learn that kale and collard greens grow up out of the ground on a plant, and you can break the leaves off, and they don't come out of a can. And they're good. When bored children become engaged children, and they learn about the deliciousness of vegetables, they get off the bus and run into the garden where the cucamelons are. Cucamelons are these little teeny tiny cucumbers that look like watermelons with a lemon's twist, and they were a favorite. They'd pick a handful of them after school and start popping them in their mouth as an alternative after-school snack with no sugar and a smile on their face every time. You see, engaged children now, not bored children. If you're going to change the composition of a neighborhood, or if you're going to revitalize a neighborhood, you have to change the composition of that neighborhood's vacant lots. And if those vacant lots happen to be owned by the city, you need to involve the city officials. And usually the way that works is city officials show up on the day of ribbon cutting and groundbreaking. And they don the bright and shiny hard hats that don't ever get worn except for ribbon cutting and groundbreaking opportunities. And they grab a gold-colored, plated shovel, and they might shovel a shovel full of dirt, but that's it. But not here. Our city officials came and grabbed a real shovel and broke a sweat and worked hard helping change the composition of this city-owned vacant lot. And it's revitalizing the neighborhood. And when that happens, you create a fan base of people that recognize that you can revitalize a neighborhood by changing the composition of vacant lots all over. And so we're going, this year, we're going to another neighborhood in our community to create a community garden that's on a vacant lot adjacent to a playground. And you're growing More Than Veggies. In our community garden, we decided that we wanted to engage children in a little different way, and so we put a little free library. We were told that we couldn't do it, but we said we were going to do it anyhow because we believe that if you put books in the hands of children and they read them or they look at the pictures, you can stretch their imaginations, you can expand their horizons, and you forever change the trajectory of their lives. And these are children that don't have easy access to books. And look at they love it. It's the first place they go when they come off the playground into the community garden. If you're going to change or revitalize a community, you have to change the composition of that community's vacant lots. Now, this isn't just something that happened in my community. It's something that can happen in your community as well. How do I know? Well, we did it here. And we're doing it here, but every community, your community, has vacant lots too. Your community has city officials that would love to see neighborhoods be revitalized. Your community has children that are bored that can become engaged. Your community has people that need to eat. In fact, that's all of us, isn't it? Your community has gardeners that would love to share their expertise with others. This is something that can happen in every community. Bored children can become engaged children. Disconnected neighbors can become connected community. And you can grow more than veggies on vacant lots simply by changing the composition of the vacant lots in your community. Which is prettier, this or that? It's the same lot. All we did was change the composition of that vacant lot. And we're revitalizing a neighborhood, and we're changing our city one vacant lot at a time.